Setting is the environment in which characters act, and the people who populate these environments. In fantasy, this is typically used to flesh out the world and create realism. But in The Hobbit, Tolkien also used the setting to establish Bilbo's quest to the Lonely Mountain as being a hero's journey. I will here illustrate the ways in which he does so, and the effects this has on Bilbo's quest. The Hobbit opens with a description of Bilbo's home. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down under or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. The triples of diction focused on comfort, nasty, dirty, wet, and dry, bare, sandy, as well as the statement, nothing to sit down on or to eat, create a prim narrative tone that conveys a sense of being cloistered, as if comfort and cleanliness are paramount. The use of childish diction with nasty and oozy emphasizes further. To the narrator, speaking from the perspective of a hobbit, it is best to avoid all such icky things. The narrator then goes on to say that Bilbo's house had a perfectly round door with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The extreme diction, perfectly and exact, imply a childish pedantism that, with childish diction shiny, show Bilbo's cloistered lifestyle to be essentially childish and immature. This is reinforced by the description of the layout of the house which follows. No going upstairs for the Hobbit. Bedrooms, bathrooms, cellars, pantries, lots of these. Wardrobes, he had whole rooms devoted to clothes. Kitchens, dining rooms, all were on the same floor and indeed on the same passage. The parenthesized narrator's inserts again create a childish tone, as if the story is being told to a little child. But more importantly, the fact that all of Bilbo's important rooms, which are listed just to emphasize how many of them there are, and let us take note of the fact that all of them are focused on comforts. The fact that all of them are on the same floor and indeed on the same passage makes it very clear that Bilbo is one who seeks comfort.
Wait, but given that The Hobbit is written for children, isn't a childish tone perfectly appropriate?
Yeah, well, Audrey, first of all, Tolkien does use a childish tone to make Bilbo sound like a childish character. And second of all, this childishness of Bilbo actually contrasts with his growth later on in the novel, and I'll get to that later. In short, Bilbo's home is used to portray his lifestyle as being centered on comforts and not exerting himself a lot. To put it another way, Bilbo, despite being 51 years old, is described like a child. This is perfectly summed up in the comment, no going upstairs for the Hobbit. And this may also be viewed as the initial stage of a hero's quest, when he lives a normal, and in this case quite literally, flat life. Thus, Tolkien describes Bilbo's home in the Shire childishly to highlight his initial immaturity and to hint at his growth later on. And soon afterwards, Bilbo receives a call to adventure from Gandalf and Thorin's company, and they venture into the wild, crossing a boundary, a river, as they do so. And before long, Bilbo and the company encounter the trials of the Misty Mountains, Mirkwood, and the Lonely Mountain. All three are described as being dark. The interior of the Misty Mountains, for instance, is deep, deep dark. Repetition of deep is used along with the abrupt tone created by the alliteration of the strong consonant D in deep, deep dark to emphasize the totality of the darkness. Not only is it dark inside the mountain, though, it was most horribly stuffy, such that once Bilbo was separated from Thorin, he could hear nothing, see nothing, feel nothing except the stone of the floor. Epiphora of nothing is used to emphasize the complete lack of sensation and create, along with the stuffiness, a sense of oppressive darkness. Thus it can be seen that the interior of the Misty Mountains, being a trial for the budding hero, is dark and oppressive. Mirkwood bears similar characteristics. In there, the quiet was so deep that their feet seemed to thump along, while all the trees leaned over them and listened. Additionally, sometimes pairs of yellow or red or green eyes would stare at Bilbo from a little distance, and sometimes they would gleam down from the branches just above him, and that was most terrifying. The description of quiet as deep emphasizes its oppressiveness, and the personification of the trees as eavesdropping, as well as the fact that they lean over the party, creates a sense of being watched, of insecurity. This is heightened with the parties being watched by the spiders, where repetition of sometimes is used to emphasize the randomness of these occurrences. And polysyllabic of yellow or red or green is used to emphasize how many spiders there are, again to create insecurity. Furthermore, nighttime in Mirkwood is pitch dark. Not what you would call pitch dark, but really pitch. So black you really could see nothing. Here, the narrator's intrusion to make this point, as well as the diction really emphasize the fact that Mirkwood truly is a dark place. And the inside of the Lonely Mountain is also quite similar. When Bilbo and the dwarves are trapped inside, they woke to darkness and silence going on unbroken. The almost tautological use of going on unbroken emphasizes the darkness and oppressive silence of the tunnels, which is so great that Florian declares, "I think I would rather be smashed by smog in the open than suffocate in here." But besides being merely dark and oppressive, there is always an element of the downwards and unending, with the tunnel in the misty mountains seeming to have no end. On and on Bilbo went, and down, with the party in Mirkwood finding their path going downwards, and before long they were in a valley filled almost entirely with a mighty growth of oaks, in which Bilbo could see no end to the trees and leaves in any direction, and with Bilbo creeping down into the dark of the Lonely Mountain. Parallelism of on and down, the superlatives almost entirely and no end at any direction, and the triple down, all emphasize that the path Bilbo must take leads downwards and never seems to end. This, along with the darkness and oppressiveness of these environments, casts them as trials for Bilbo to overcome, corresponding to the underworld ventures of the heroes of yore, Orpheus in rescuing Eurydice, for instance. And in every instance, Bilbo grows as a result of his trials. In the misty mountains, he learns empathy and spares Gollum's life. And thereafter, the passage that was sloping down began to go up again, and after a while, it climbed steeply. And Bilbo escapes from the mountain and returns from his underworld journey a better person. In Mirkwood, he learns strength and rescues the dwarves from the spiders, and becomes a much fiercer and bolder person for it. And in the Lonely Mountain, he learns courage and confronts Smaug, and later he and the dwarves travel through the ruined city and to stairs that were smooth, cut out of the living rock, broad and fair, and up the dwarves went, eventually to emerge outside the mountain. The physical rising and descending here can be seen as representative of Bilbo's return from his underworld trial and his elevation to a superior state of being, to being more empathetic, more strong, more courageous. Thus, Tolkien uses these underworldly settings to illustrate Bilbo's growth throughout the novel, particularly in contrast to his earlier comfort-loving and sheltered self. After completing all the trials and reconciling the dwarves and elves and men, Bilbo makes the journey back to the Shire. He crosses two rivers as he does so, with the river symbolizing the boundary between the world of adventure and growth and the world of normalcy and home. But as he returns, he is not the same hobbit he was. As shown with the sound of the kettle on his hearth was ever more musical than it had been even in the quiet days before the unexpected party. The superlative ever is used to emphasize how musical the singing of the kettle is. And here the kettle singing is a form of metonymy used to represent everyday life. Tolkien thus suggests that as a result of having adventures, your everyday life upon your return will be ever more enjoyable. He goes on to describe what Bilbo does with the treasure he has gained. His sword he hung over a mantelpiece. His coat of mail was arranged on a stand in the hall until he lent it to a museum. His gold and silver was largely spent on presents, both useful and extravagant, which to a certain extent accounts for the affections of his nephews and nieces. His magic ring kept a great secret, for he chiefly used it when unpleasant callers came. Parallelism is used to create a matter-of-fact tone, parallelism, about these proceedings, which emphasizes their normalcy and indicates a return to a slow way of life for Bilbo. Yet his adventure has had a profound impact on his normal life. His sword is now put in pride of place, and his mithril armor displayed prominently for all to see. These show his unconcern for the disreputability that would have worried him in the past, and indicate his growth from being sheltered and thus insular to being more experienced, having seen more of the world. Not only that, the parallelism here creates a sense of balance, as if, as a result of all his adventures, Bilbo's life is now complete and balanced. Additionally, all the treasure Bilbo gained benefits him in his normal life in the form of presents and a handy escape tool. Bilbo's adventure is thus shown to have been no bad thing for him. Finally, humor is used in a narrative insert, which to a certain extent accounts for the affection of his nephews and nieces. And in Bilbo's use of his ring for acts as small and silly as escaping from unpleasant callers. And it imbues this description of Bilbo's life with a sense of fun that the description of his life before the adventure did not. Tolkien's description of the Shire and Bilbo's home after the adventure therefore suggests that throughout the growth that occurs on an adventure, life will be infinitely more enjoyable and better and more complete than before.
I have a question. So, like, you've talked about the hero's quest and how Bilbo's quest is a hero's quest, but like, how does it matter?
So Bilbo is portrayed as an everyman character that we can all relate to because just like us, he likes good food and not really doing a lot and comforts. In having character like an everyman character like Bilbo embark on his adventure, Tolkien is suggesting that we can be like Bilbo, can all go on adventures of epic proportions, can all grow and profit from them. In a sense, therefore, because Tolkien uses Bilbo's quest as an encouragement for us to have our adventures of our own, the casting of his adventure as heroic emphasizes the sense of encouragement from that. I finally explained the metaphorical setting of The Hobbit, the endless road that Bilbo sings of near the end of the story. Now, I would like to recite the song in its entirety, but there isn't really enough time for that. Suffice it to say that the first stanza describes his adventures over rock and under tree, and the various environments he passes through. More noteworthy is the second stanza. Roads go ever on, under cloud and under star. Yet feet that wandering have gone, turn at last to home far. Eyes that fire and sword have seen, and horror in the halls of stone. Look at last on meadows green, and trees and hills they long have known. In arranging gone and far to be the final words of the respective lines, Tolkien emphasizes the distance the traveler is from his native lands, which is further emphasized with the repeated relieved exclamation, at last. And with the synecdoche fire and sword, which stands for war and battle, destruction is juxtaposed with the peace created by the pastoral meadows green, all to emphasize the longing the traveler feels for home. The familiarity for home is further emphasized with the final clause being, they long have known. But does the traveler's journey end here? Of course not. Roads go ever on after all, and if that wasn't obvious enough, Tolkien emphasizes that by repeating ever. And the way the traveler is described just as feet, the synecdoche suggesting that his most important function is to walk on, clearly shows that this road of adventure and growth is one that never ends. Home, therefore, is part of the adventure and not the end of it. Bilbo's growth is not fully realized until he returns home and finds life far more enjoyable than before. Truly, an adventure is, as the subtitle of this novel goes, there and back again, because the there exists for the back again. So it can be seen that Tolkien uses setting in The Hobbit to cast Bilbo's quest as being heroic, to illustrate his growth as a result of his adventure, and along with all that he gains from it, wealth, experience, and an enjoyable life. Its implications for us as readers could not be clearer. Tolkien is suggesting, no, exhorting us not to be content with a cloistered, insular, inexperienced life, not to maintain it for some childish desire for respectability, but to go out and have adventures, so that we may grow, so that we may profit, so that when we return afterwards, our lives will be so much more fun. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have another one. Like, do you think there are any things that Tolkien is trying to show with all these underworld parts besides just Bilbo's journey?
Okay, so as part of his underworld trials, Bilbo goes into dark and frightening places to overcome difficulties. And as a direct result of all that, he grows. Tolkien therefore suggests that in order to grow from a child to an adult, you need to overcome difficulties. That if you don't, you will never grow. Tolkien's message to readers about growth is therefore that in order to grow, you need to face difficulties. And this actually links in with his message for us to have adventures, because adventures involve difficulties, and